Good morning, world. Okay, so in continuing with our series on mental health awareness, today I will be speaking about something that has me absolutely outraged, and you should be outraged too. Today we're talking about child suicide. There is nothing worse in a society than to have its own youth decide that life, the future, is not worth it and that they need to get out of this. I cannot imagine anything worse that could happen to a community where your future feels like there's no future. We cannot, in any society, especially in this one, we cannot accept this. Recently, there have been a lot more reports of children committing suicide. And the other thing that has me so outraged is that the ages are getting younger and younger. Seriously. Why are we not outraged? Why is our community not getting up and saying, no, this is unacceptable. We're not going to sit and take this. We're going to help our kids. I've been trying to find more recent statistics, but the closest thing I could find was about 10 years old, where the CDC was reporting that 1 to 2 out of every 100 children were committing suicide. That adds up to about 300 kids a year from the age of 10 to 14. Really? 300 children? That is not acceptable. When it gets a little bit higher, when we're looking at 15 to 19-year-olds, we're looking at our teens, that number goes up to 1,621, which is about 8 out of every 100,000. Or for young adults, ages 20 to 24, we're looking at 13 out of 100,000, which adds up to about 2,373 young adults every year who, instead of joining our adult community, decide that, you know what, I'm better off gone. As a society, this is not acceptable. Yes, when you're looking at one out of 100,000, statistically, the numbers are not that high, but actually they are way too high. One child committing suicide is too many. 1 out of 100,000 does not mean anything to me. 1 period means everything to me, and it should mean everything to you, because these are our future. These are the kids. That's the next major scientist. That could be the kid that would revolutionize our society. That could be the kid that was going to find the cure to cancer. That was going to, I don't know, cure pollution. But because we failed that child, we're not going to have that next major discovery. It's not acceptable to have 300 children die every year. But what's worse is that this isn't as bad as it gets. These 300 who succeed are what we know of. Then there is about another 2 million kids and young adults who attempt suicide but don't succeed, but make enough of damage that their attempt is caught. But there's also all these kids and all these young adults, all these teenagers who are attempting suicide, not succeeding, but they did not cause enough damage that their attempt becomes known. So although we may have a certain number, we may be saying, okay, 2 million, but that 2 million is certainly multiplied when you look at the fact that a lot of attempts go unnoticed. A lot of attempts go unknown. When I was learning, when I was in school and we were discussing childhood suicide, some of the examples that we learned about were like children doing things that one may perceive as accidental. For example, a kid walking out in front of a moving vehicle. To an adult, you're saying that's careless of that child, they should know better, and you go and you scold this kid for walking out in front of a vehicle, when that poor child was just trying to just find a way out. Suicide occurs, whether it's the thought or the actual commission of the act. That happens when someone gets to the point where life, a situation, whatever they're going through, feels so overwhelming that they think that there's no other way. Their best out is to just be out of this life. It's unacceptable to have our kids bearing such a great burden that they think the only way out is for them to no longer be here, for them to no longer be a part of our society. That is unacceptable. America, we need to do better. There are so many resources that are available. But one of the worst things that's happening, one of the things that's probably leading or contributing most to this, is the fact that a lot of times we think that, no, not my kid. Yes, your kid too. Every kid goes through life. Every child is exposed to trauma. Every child can experience hardship. And as a society, we need to be vigilant. We need to be there for our children. We need to be providing our children with resources. We need to be paying attention to them, and we need to see when they're reaching out, when they're calling out, when they're asking us, please help. We have to be able to do something. We have to be there, because we can't have our kids feeling so alone in the world that they would rather be gone than be here. I've mentioned before that depression is often a contributor to suicide. No, someone being depressed does not necessarily mean that that person is about to commit suicide. But what we have found is that in most cases that a person commits suicide, there is depression involved. Either that person was currently going through a depression, or have recently been depressed, or some combination, but somehow depression is almost always involved in suicide. But in children, especially in quite so in adolescence as well, depression does not always manifest the way it does in kids, the way it does in adults. And I will be doing another series where I will talk about another video where I will talk about recognizing depression signs in children, because an adolescent may not be sitting back and moody the way and they may not show the same depressive signs as an adult shows. And for adults, it may be perceived that this child being oppositional, this child being moody. And for children, the younger ones, it may show up more in behaviors. It may be that this great kid suddenly becomes the behavior problem child in the classroom, or suddenly starts having behavior issues at home. All of these are little things that we can notice. And as a society, we need to do more. It may not have been your kid, but it was a kid that affects you because it was a child. And one thing we have to always remember is that suicide, once a person is exposed to it, it increases their acceptance of it. And in one of the past videos that I did when I addressed adult depression or suicide, I'm not sure which one, where I talked about when if there's a history of someone committing suicide in a family, that the likelihood or the propensity increases, the susceptibility increases for other people. When we do suicide assessments, we often ask people, have you known anyone who committed suicide? So when your kid hears about suicide, someone committing suicide, that idea is already there. And one thing that people often worry about is when someone asking someone if they're suicidal. and thinking that that might give them the idea. No, that's not true. Asking someone if you're suicidal doesn't give them the idea. If I'm not thinking about killing myself, just because you ask me, hey, are you thinking about killing yourself? That's not going to suddenly give me the idea, oh, that sounds like a good idea. No, that doesn't work that way. So we need to be able to be bold, be frank, and ask. In the next couple of videos, I will talk a little bit more about how to approach the situation, what we can do when we know that kids and other people in our lives are potentially suicidal. For the first, or one of the best resources that is available, is the crisis line, which is 800-273-TALK. That's 800-273-8255. Where if you are experiencing thoughts of suicide, if you know somebody that you think may be suicidal, reach out to this number, find the resources, get help for yourself or for someone in your life who may need it, please. So that's about all we have for today. Good morning, world. Have a great day.